thank you for sitting through us while we got everything working here this evening. Last year, I applied for a grant through the STEPS program to do a series of village walks, walking through history, and STEPS was very generous with it. They funded everything I asked for, and they were very well attended. They far exceeded any expectation that I had that they would be successful. Back in November, December, when the Historical Society was trying to come up with a program for January, Marty and Mary Jean, who weren't able to be a part of any of the tours, suggested that we do an inside tour, and we decided that the railroad one would probably be the most interesting. Therefore, we scheduled it for January, and then we got a snowstorm. And so we're here this evening on a much warmer night. It's almost feels like what we were dealing with in July when we went on this walk. But because we're not walking, I've added but some new things that weren't part of the original tour. So I hope you'll enjoy it. And we're going to start by looking at Mr. Preston up on the smokestack at the Halsey Canning Factory. The thing you have to remember is that this is taken back in the 30s or the 40s. There are no selfies. There are two smokestacks. So George is sitting on this one, and Preston Kellogg, his brother, is sitting on the one a few feet away from him taking that picture. And to get a good idea of the height of that thing, there is, right down there, standing by the tracks in white, is a person. Additionally, we're used to seeing, okay, here's Halsey Canning Factory, then you've got to go up Clinton and across Leroy to get to the rest of the railroad pieces. We're not having to do that tonight, although we're going to do it in a way, but there's your track. You're looking right up the track from the canning factory, that dirt strip crossing the two tracks down there is Clinton Street, and then further up is all of your depot area stuff. So it's a straight piece. If we look at the Sanborn map, canning factory is way over on this corner, and then you're following the tracks, and there's your the new.
So north is to the left?
North is to the left, and I've tried to orient north to the left as much as possible so that we're all on the same looking at everything. Before we really start, we need a little bit of background history. The depot was not the first thing there, and we have in the Historical Society collection a number of diary collections. One of the favorite ones I like to go to is Wheeler Bassett's diaries, and these were written in 1873. He was born in 1850, I think, but I don't remember that date. Anyway, teenager, late teenager, whatever. He talked in his diaries about walking from Bassett Road down to the area where they were laying tracks to see tracks, locomotive, and whatever. And then on August 28th, they actually had a train. It was an open flat car that they had put some benches on, so it certainly was not anything comfortable to ride on. But it traveled from Farmer to Ithaca. They spent some time in Ithaca. They came back to Farmer, but instead of getting off, the passenger were getting an extra treat that day. They went from here to a place called Romulusville. Now we only call it Romulus. And that's where the tracks ended. A couple weeks later, on the 19th of September, Wheeler says that he took the first train for Romulusville and saw C.M. Titus drive the last spike on the Ithaca and Geneva Railroad it rained some and they had a fine dinner and free ride, but what he's saying is that you can now go from Ithaca to Geneva on the train. It's almost like the Golden Spike out west and whatnot. His diaries are wonderful. We've got them in various formats and over various years. If anybody wants to try Marty, I think you've used him for some of his other stuff. Now, some people may ask the question, why are there two railroad lines in Seneca County? You have, over here and try to, you have coming out of Venneton, comes up to Ithaca, and then up through here and up to Geneva. This one starts in Venneton, comes across Schuyler County, and up over closer to Seneca Lake. The reason for that, if you've ever tried coming out of Ithaca on a less than perfect day, and I don't care whether you're coming up 96 or 89, you're coming uphill. One of the comments that were made, and I'll get to that in a minute, but what you've got is the grade is such that they didn't want the freight lines. It took too many engines to get the freight lines up that hill and whatnot. So freight goes up through Schuyler County and across to Lodi and Candia and Varick and on up to Geneva. Whereas the passenger lines, and when we get to the Black Diamond especially, that's coming down through Interlaken, Farmer. We've got, hopefully you can see it here, there are actually two engines on this train. And this is a photo I took from Dave Marcham's book. Both engines, okay. Anybody here walk the Black Diamond Trail? You know, it's, you come out of Cass Park and you're walking uphill. This is taken on the railroad tracks back when it was. And he wrote, both engines are working at full throttle, blasting up the grade above Teganic Boulevard. Here we see them leaving their gifts of steam, smoke, soot, and cinders. This is a tremendous sight unless your home is nearby. So that's why we have two rail lines that close together. The canning factory. It was originally known as the Seneca Canning Company and then later purchased by Yeager and Halstead. January 28, 1916, the Interlaken Review noted, "It will interest all to know something of the amount of business done there last year. A total of 36,256 cases of canned goods were put up, peas, corn, pumpkins, and apples. The amount paid to farmers for produce, $12,482 and change, and for labor, $14,659 and change." This is in 1916. That's telling you how much it was putting into the community. November 1928, the new addition to the Halstead Canning Company nearly doubles the size of the original main building. And then, of course, the news that nobody wanted to hear, Trumansburg Free Press, March 18, 1955. The Halstead Canning Company plant on Clinton Street, Interlaken, will be closed May 1 after 44 years of operation. So that's a 1960s photo of the whole operation. A couple of those buildings are still standing, but let's look at this one from back in the 1930s. There are your two smokestacks rising above everything. And this is a diorama done by Steve Hildebrandt many, many years ago that shows a lot of the canning factory. I was in studying for all of this and the programs and whatnot, I always presumed that the housing was up sort of parallel to Clinton Street. And looking at this and realizing what we were seeing, the top right area there is the migrant housing, and Papa Joe, I think it's Papa Joe's, anyway, Papa's store and everything. A couple of these buildings, as I said, are still available.
Diane,
1910
on the previous, where were the tracks?
The tracks are running
Diagonally across the top.
diagonally across the top, yeah.
There's remnants of the housing buildings still there.
All of that, though, is, the whole property is private property and no trespassing signs, although the tracks are, the railway tracks are easement or whatever on the electric company, but yeah. Anybody else have a question? 1910, you've got your three little buildings there, and you can see what they're talking about in 1930, how much it's grown. The 1930 map did not show the housing and whatnot in there. That's one of the buildings that's still there today. And that's one of them that's tucked back, and because I was taking these in the wintertime, you actually can see it. Across the road from the canning factory, we had the Interlaken Creamery. It originally began as the Elgin Creamery, and the building was constructed in the 1890s. The sketch there was included in the Farmer Review, December 21, 1895. Items in the local paper noted that John Villamonte was the butter maker. In June 1899, the Elgin Butter Company sold the business and requested book accounts to be settled. Come January 1909, the new butter factory was being prepared to open in mid-March. In July 1919, Halstead Canning Company purchased the Interlaken Creamery property and converted the building to an elevator. I find it by 1930, it's gone. That's what it looked like in 1904. As we wander up Clinton Street, this group of buildings here, the most I know about them is from a newspaper article that was headlined, "3 Buildings Burned." At about 9 o'clock last Friday night, Boughton and McMahon's evaporator on Clinton Street was discovered to be on fire. The building consisted of 4 kilns, the fire starting in the second kiln from the west end. In a very few minutes, the building was a mass of flames and soon fell in. The flames ignited a cooper shop owned by Tim's Brothers, foundry, and a feed mill, only a few feet to the east of the evaporator. The new feed mill just put in, a few belts and some feed was all that was saved from the building. Sparks showered onto the buildings of L.C. Bradley and Company and I.B. Wagner's and Company cold storage, but a strict watch prevented any damage there. None of the buildings were insured. Mr. Stout's shop contained all his tools and material for about 1,000 barrels, of which nothing was rescued. He places his loss at about 800. Boughton and McMahon had no insurance. Their loss will be about 300. The most serious loss is that of Tim's Brothers, the amount being $2,500 to $3,000. All of the patterns in the foundry were burned. Their gasoline engine was not seriously damaged, however, and as their feed mill was got out safely, it is hoped they will soon get started again and be able to rebuild the whole plant. That is from November of 1906. W.P. Boughton, this is from November of 1913. W.P. Boughton has sold his building and lot, corner of Clinton and Leroy Streets, to the town of Covert, possession to be given December 1st, 1913. It will be altered and made a place for storing the steamroller and other machinery. Just to give you an idea, most of that equipment is up here and where the building is now. Some of it extended a little further down to where they've got their new storage shed. Can you see all right, Carolyn? This picture was given to us more recently, and it drove me crazy for a while because it looked like it should be Interlaken, but it didn't look like Interlaken. And it took me a while to finally figure out what I was missing. This is, as you can see from the Sanborn map down in the bottom, this is what became Daly's, down that end of the street and everything. But the problem was it didn't look like I expected it to look, and it took a while. Even looking at some of the other maps and looking at other Sanborns, it didn't look right. And the reason is, oops, this is after Daly's bought it and some construction they did in the early 1940s. All right, go back. The Daly brothers, Harold and Jim, bought the grain and feed business of A.O. Emmons and opened on Monday, February 15, 1943. Emmons had been in that location for 25 years. They had a grinder to grind and fix farmers' feed, often mixing in molasses for a sweet feed. For the coal operation, and this is the Daly brothers, they built a half-moon, that's that thing at the back corner there. They built a half-moon coal elevator and bins. There were bins for the different sized coals. The unloader was under the track and could offload a coal car in 30 minutes directly to the correct bin. Prior to that, it would take 3 or 4 men all day to unload one car. The businesses included the GLF, which stood for Grange League Federation, and then Agway. Jim was a carpenter and built several buildings related to the operation. Included was a new building on the north end of the railroad loading docks. And in 1947, he built the International Harvester building across the street. And the reason that I had so much trouble, because that is the building I've always known. And I was not able to see the other building until, you look at it and then all of a sudden a couple pieces start falling into place. After serving the agricultural community, the railside buildings have been a fitness station, auction house, and are now apartments. And then of course, that's Betzler's. This is another one of those pictures that you've got to look at it and look at enough of the pieces to finally put it together. For years, I have looked at it and I thought I was standing on the east side of the railroad tracks. You're not. You're standing on the west side of the tracks.
Mm-hmm.
The building that we're talking about is the double tall-story one in the back there, and that's the Wagner cold storage building, and I'll get to it in a minute. First I want to talk a little bit about this picture. What finally made me look at it and realize I was looking in the wrong things is looking at all of the pieces and then putting the Sanborn map together with it. So you have the cold storage labeled right up to there. Then you have the depot. You've seen just a little bit of the overhead of the depot there, and that's when I realized I was looking at it in the wrong direction, because if you're seeing that piece of the depot, you're standing on the west side of the tracks looking east. Additionally, there's this little fence here, and if I were to flip back to the pictures, the older picture of the ag buildings and everything, you would see what looks like a stock fence and a stock loader. You're nodding your head, so you know more about this than I do.
No, I don't, but I'm agreeing with you.
Oh, all right. Well, that's always good. The other thing you'll see in the Sanborn map is that you've got one rail line. That's those double little lines are all rail lines. You've got one line over by the cold storage, and then you've got 3 lines over towards the bottom of the photo. And let me read the article about the fire that took that one out. Fires were natural enemy of so many things back then. This is taken from May 1913. The plant was located just east of the Lehigh Valley Railroad tracks near the depot. The cold storage building was built in 1900 at a cost of between $7,000 and $8,000. The building was 120 by 40 feet, 2 stories high, with basement and compactly built of the best pine lumber. An ice house about 20 feet high, which is the little building off to the end, stood directly south of the building, and in this the fire originated. How the fire originated is a mystery, as no fire had been in the buildings for 2 or 3 years, and none at all in the ice house. It is said that a lot of straw and old papers were in it, and the place was a refuge for tramps at night. But that, as well as the idea of spontaneous combustion, is only surmise. 2 trains of freight cars on the switch were in imminent danger, the sides smoking from the intense heat, when an engine and crew that had been telephoned for came up from Ithaca and pulled them to a place of safety. We understand there was about $4,000 insurance on the property, carried by the 5 counties insurance company. The buildings were owned by a cold storage firm in Newark, New Jersey. The firemen deserve much credit for the way they handled the fire. So there are actually 3 different pieces of train equipment. Closest to the depot, you can see the people unloading stuff off of the baggage car onto the railroad cart. Up closest here we have the open gondola, and then behind that with a man standing on top of it is a camelback engine and tender. So let's talk about
Diane,
that.
want to take a break?
Okay. This is the first station, and there was no station when Wheeler was writing about the train rides that he went on. I have not yet found a date for when this station was built, but probably in the mid-1870s. It was used until June 10, and within a week of the new station opening, it was moved to Bergen Beach Road and used as a cottage. We actually have a picture of the cottage. They did what so many people do. They moved it, they put the roof up another story, and there was a cottage down there. It was about the time the Historical Society was getting interested in it. It had been torn down. This is an interior shot that we have of the old depot. Note the Ithaca clock there on the wall. Don't look at the gentleman unless you like looking at really bad eyes. Those old photos, because it took so long, the eyes just sort of got really spooky. So how much could that depot help? A correspondent says several thousand barrels of apples have been shipped from the Farmer Village Depot this season. That was Wednesday, November 17, 1875. January 1888, we are informed that more pounds of fruit are handled at Farmer Village Depot than any other station between Geneva and Ithaca. Again, 1888. So we've got a lot of things going out of that depot. I love this picture because, again, when you start researching it, the label that was on it and the actual photograph are not the same. Because the original label that was on it said that it's July 4th, 1900, and it's the first McCormick Reaper equipment delivered to Farmer. It wasn't, and again, and the first time I researched this, we were still in the microfilm age, and I sat there and read microfilm for a few hours looking for an article, starting with the reports on what happened July 4th. Absolutely nothing happened to the village on July 4th, 1900. So I kept going back and going back and going back, and I found 2 articles. The June 2nd, 1900 article, unique exhibition is being arranged for Thursday next at Farmer. The McCormick Harvester Machine Company will, that day, deliver the machines sold in this section during the winter and spring. There will be 100 self-binders in a procession through the principal streets. Every farmer taking home a machine will get his dinner and horses fed for free. A week later, on the June 9th article, agents of several harvesting machine companies have made a lively canvass around here for some months past, and the McCormick agents gave a unique show last Thursday that will long be remembered. Local agents Oscar B. Yarnell of Hates Corners, John C. Townsend of Lodi, and Arthur Rappley of this place had all their sales of machinery shipped to Farmer, where purchases were to call for it on June 7th. Plans were perfected whereby a good crowd was brought to town, kept all day. The purchasers were entertained by the agents. 3 bands were on hand. In the afternoon, the machinery, consisting of binders, mowers, corn harvesters, and rakes, were loaded in wagons and paraded through the principal streets, disbanding at the Gamby House. So it's not one piece of equipment, but it's hundreds of pieces of equipment, and you can imagine. Now granted, this equipment's nowhere near as big as what we're getting today for farm equipment, but it would have taken a few trains and loads to get over 100 pieces of farm equipment into the village for that single day. And of course, the weather did its part. They were supposed to have a ball game and a few other games and things, and it rained to the point they had to cancel them. And I think that road is looking pretty muddy.
Where are the reapers?
There are some,
Well, there's a little bit of one.
yeah, there's big, yeah, you have to look closely and, you know. But the detail of these old photos, you know, and you can pick out buildings. Some people probably have that picture at home and say, oh, that was Grandpa.
But that train load really changed the way farming was done. Instead of being out there with a cradle on the side,
Yep. Yep.
didn't really go at it.
1904, what shall we name our village? The Lehigh Valley Railroad offered to build a new station if the name could be changed. Farmer was a dedicated station where the passengers were coming up from Long Island and downstate near New York City and all of those fashionable places, probably even from Philadelphia, and the conductor would be saying, all out for Farmer. And George Westinghouse down in the Sheldrake area, Hitters area, was one of the people instrumental and behind encouraging the railroad to offer the prize, you know, get the new name so that it would be a much swankier place. Thankfully, we had very reasonable village fathers at the time. 1904, they were looking to incorporate the village. They were looking for a new name for the depot, train depot. They were looking for, if the depot was going to be one name, everything was going to be the same name. And so on July 1st, 1904, the station, the post office, and the review were all named Interlaken. Somebody, and I've never been able to find out where they came up with the name, but somebody thought it should be named Creston. Thankfully, T.P. House, who ran the review, was very clear-headed and worked and said, guys, you know, let's not be the oddball. Let's go with what the rest of the group is doing. Georgiana Wheeler was the one that suggested Interlaken based on her recent visit to Switzerland. And when they built the new terminal station, it was the opposite layout of the old one. On the old layout, the passenger end was at the south and baggage was at the north. This is looking at the new terminal, the proposed terminal, and here we're standing on the tracks looking at it. The section with the columns and whatnot, that's the passenger end, and then the freight end is down at the bottom. A couple of interesting, and again, I would love for somebody to be able to answer this one question. April 15, 1910. The new depot is rapidly nearing completion. The contractor is doing more than his contract calls for in some respects. Oak finish instead of hard pine, and a novelty in cement floor in the waiting room that will be very pretty. If you go down there at the right time, this is all gone. It's now the I thought I had silenced that thing. There is where some of the part where the waiting room would have been, there is like a 4-foot circular indentation. And I've always wondered what was in that space, and then finding this, it makes me think there really was something there that, you know, people could look at. So there's our proposed, and there's what it looked like on opening day. Pardon?
My
Yeah.
old house in the background.
Yep. Which one?
Candidos,
Yes. Yes, only that's not what it was originally called.
Rourke Hotel.
Hmm?
Rourke Hotel?
Yep.
Which was
The one in the far back
Oh,
there.
that's that one, okay, thank you.
Yep, across the road was the Hotel Rourke. From its beginnings in the late 1800s, it was a landmark and gathering place for the community. 1944, James Drake, and this is long after it's been sold out of the Rourke family, but it was a landmark. James Drake has purchased the vacant lot just north of the former Hotel Rourke and plans to erect a feed store on the site as soon as possible. A few years later, the feed store would be purchased and became the Penny Saver office. There's the interior. There's another shot, and there's an even better picture of the hotel. But you can see there's that vacant lot there that they're talking about. Another photo. And again, there's a little bit of that agricultural end of the world. And there's James Drake's feed store that became the Penny Saver. And then we have this building off on the right end here. And as many of you hopefully have heard, if you've read the newsletter, Chelsea at the library is working to document the village homes and buildings and whatnot. And I said, well, Chelsea, can we get a jump on something else and get some information on this particular building? Like everything else, it has some variances because in the early photos, it's a small building with a front porch, and one place in her documentation, they even called it a saloon, but later it was torn down and replaced with the current building that's there. And she can't find any documentation as to when, why, you know, was it a fire? Was it the family that bought it wanted to tear it down and build the better house? Just nothing there. But if anybody knows, stop in the library, talk to her. If you've got a village house especially, and you're looking for more data, she is doing an incredible job filling out these. Well, the one for this particular building is 13 pages long. It's a major expansion on what was done back in the
1979.
79 when Patterson had a select number of buildings. But there's information on those pages that give you guides to go looking for more.
So it's intended to be a 4-year project, we're in year 2.
Yeah. Now we're standing on Cayuga Street now. There's the depot, there's the building as it looks now, and this is the photo that kept me from realizing what I was looking at before. The really neat thing about this one is that there on the left-hand side is the original milk processing plant. The old milk plant, which was built in 1929, was torn down and a new plant opened October 8, 1956. Here we're looking north. Again, this is from David Marcham's book. It's showing, you can see clearly where the tracks are, and I don't think that's an accident looking to happen because the caption notes that the train is waiting to back into the siding to get to the milk plant. That siding takes you right into the milk plant. But those are the agricultural buildings on the north of Cuba Street. If we go back and look at the whole thing from this direction, the piece that I'd really like you to notice is this white pole with the steps here. And its purpose was so that the trains coming through, especially the Black Diamond, which didn't stop here, but it came through here, they were able to grab the mail bags off of that hook. What was coming in was thrown on the ground. What was going out was picked up off of that hook. So you're looking at the whole stretch going north there. And this just gives you an idea of the comparison of the 1904 and the 1930 Sanborn maps. They were buildings, storage products related to the needs of the farmer. You can see on the one, grain and hay, grain elevator, coal pockets, hay, coal. And then you can also see there's the double track, but you can see that siding coming off towards the milk plant. There's an overhead view. We have 4 1960s era color photographs. Some of us have ones of our house out in the country or whatever, but we have 4 of them here in the village. And this one shows the depot. Down here in the bottom center, you've got just a little piece of the overhead for the milk plant. This would be the new milk plant. And then you've got the buildings that go up there. And then we have another photo, again, just showing a little bit different. This building is we have this drawing of it, and we know its history, but it's not shown on any of the Sanborn maps. It was the George Torbert bean elevator. The building was originally built in 1852 as the Universalist Church on Main Street. When the church closed in 1896, they sold the building to Mr. Torbert. He moved it east from its location, and it was on the south edge of the Reformed Church property. You had the Reformed Church, the Session House, and then the Universalist Church. So they picked it up, turned it 180 degrees, and took it from Main Street down to the railroad tracks. Amazing how they used to do that. It was used as a bean elevator. July 23rd, 1904, the building burned, reduced to a charred mass of ruins. One of the really interesting parts about it, there is a bell up in that tower, and when they were getting ready to sell the building and whatnot, they took the bell out, and they always had contests for this, that, and everything else, and the contest was for what the bell weighed, and I don't remember, I have it buried someplace in notes, but anyway, that became the new fire bell that was on Main Street for years. So another building lost to fire. Two more looks at the depot. It was owned by Neisig, and they were using it for storage, and then they were getting concerned that vandals and whatnot, and so it went from a beautiful old building to a pile of rubble. Thankfully we have this picture because the photographers for the Interlaken Review of Germansburg Free Press had taken a lot of photos, and a few years ago he went through and sorted them out, and we received a stack of photos of Interlaken related things. I think Ovid received a stack, Trumansburg probably has a lot of them still. But what's interesting to note is there's your milk plant in the background. That building is still standing because it's part of, I still call it Pine Tree, but there's that building.
So that was a brick structure, the main part?
The main part of the
Yep.
depot?
Depot, yeah.
No, depot. No, it was poured terracotta filled with sand. And it was more or less declared fireproof. I could, again, I have it written down, I didn't want to keep you here all night with more explanations of things. But yeah, it was quite a building. Steam heat, electric lights, all of the modern amenities of the day and everything. One more railroad track picture. The flood of 1935 took out a lot of railroad bridges. This one is down on Cemetery Road, County Road 150, where it crosses there at the cemetery, and it washed out the whole creek. John has talked about his dad or your grandfather bringing gravel down or something afterwards. No? Okay. Historians don't remember things all the way, but anyway, that's all that's left of the railroad track. So there weren't any trains running for a while they got all of these. And it wasn't just here. It was all along the way, so they had to rebuild things as quickly as they could. I mentioned the Black Diamond, and these are just two drawings that Ann Knight did of the earlier Black Diamond trains. And then this picture, one documentation says that it's the last run of the Black Diamond, which happened on May 11th, 1959, and people are saying, well, isn't that all snow on the banks? I can't tell you because somebody else says the picture's from 1956 in July. So that's even less likely that it's snow. But based on...
I think it was built on cinders and different things, because I remember it looked kind of orangey.
Are you talking about the depot now?
I'm talking about, there, north of Interlaken,
The base of the tracks.
base of the track.
Anything, that could be. But my thought was that it was whatever the trains, the cherry blossoms and all the other good things that rained down on us this time, yes.
Usually when they constructed these things, the first thing they did is they put like sort of a wooden trestle so that they could keep moving equipment, supplies, rail and ties. Then they came through and filled it in with stones, cinders, whatever. So that might be why it looks, as you said,
Yeah.
orange. And why it looks like that. I would look at those trees in the background. If you can blow them up, you might actually see they're foliated as
Yeah.
opposed to
They certainly look
have
like it.
leaves.
Yeah. So, this is taken Route 96, just north of Foots Corners. So anyway, the Black Diamond came through for the last time May 11th, 1959, and it was noted that it was the end of an era in public transportation. The Black Diamond ran from Jersey City to Buffalo from 1896 until 1959. The trains had changed from steam to diesel and mahogany to utilitarian within their cars. And then we have this one. As fewer passengers were traveling by train, there was also less freight, and the Lehigh Valley began using a smaller two-car passenger and baggage unit referred to as a doodlebug. That's what they're listed in the roster as, is a doodlebug. They're a cute little thing. I have a set for my model railroad. And shown in this picture is Jack Wiggins and an assistant loading the mail onto the Doodle Bug, ready to head back to Ithaca. And then Joan Young gave me a copy of this. Her parents, the Learys, lived out on 96, the Leary farm just south of Powell Road, and the railroad track ran along the back of their property, and this is the last Lehigh Valley engine that came through Interlaken headed to Ithaca. So on that note, yes. Thank you all for coming. I will welcome any questions. I'm sure some of you know more